Hello, everybody, and welcome to a live reading of issue 42 of my newsletter. Are GPTs websites, or are they perhaps something else altogether? So, this past week, I guess week and a half now at this point, by the time that I'm filming this, the GPT store has come out. If you're familiar with GPT stores, they're basically directories of different GPT apps. We've seen other stuff like this in the past before, namely things like Product Hunt, which list out new releases for projects, as well as kind of GPT tools and websites where people will post different GPT projects that people have made. The difference about this one is it's official. This means that OpenAI has created an app store of sorts. And this app store is kind of exactly what you imagine an app store to do. There's going to be rankings and reviews. Different apps are going to be segregated from others by category. And people will kind of build up their personal catalog of favorite GPTs and plugins. The reasons that I want to talk about this in this issue that I wrote here first, was I was really wondering, what's the difference between a GPT and a website? And I don't really think that it is that obvious that there are distinct differences between the two, but in the rest of this newsletter issue, we'll be going over that. So the store itself will feature community use cases of GPTs, which is basically things that people have been using with their own GPTs that they now can share with the community writ large. I think that there's going to be a new kind of market with rules for money that doesn't exist yet. And I am going to go into this in a later issue, kind of like talking about what I think a new creator money economy might look like with GPTs, but it's pretty exciting. We're going to be deluged with many poorly thought out GPTs. That's just a thing that's going to be happening. There's going to be a lot of GPTs out there that are really bottom of the barrel, the same as the way that a lot of the apps on the App Store are, right? Especially without any kind of really hard written approval process. And finally, I think that the release of the official OpenAI store, App Store, I guess GPT store, legitimizes truly novel experiences that have yet to be uncovered. A lot of this is going to be done with actions, and I'll talk about that in a later issue as well, with my own experiences building things for the GPTs. So in part 2 of the holiday issue, I made a prediction that GPTs are going to pop up in places that QR menus and point of sale iPads exist, and that people will get used to talking to agents in a variety of scenarios. I have pretty high confidence about this. So what do I mean by this? When COVID hit and people started not wanting to touch physical menus, a lot of restaurants updated their physical offering varieties to using these QR codes. A lot of these QR code menus were kind of buggy. Some of them were pointing to images. Some of them were pointing to websites that took 15 minutes to load. Some of the text wouldn't work on the screen. It was a really big nightmare overall. There was not much consistency between QR code menu to QR code menu. But I do think that people kind of got more familiar with the idea of having web URLs as images across these physical devices. When you really think of what a menu is, or a kind of offering from a business, basically what they are is saying, this is what the business has, and this is what you don't know about the business. Again, this is really obvious when you go to a Italian place and they say, okay, this is the spaghetti we serve, these are the ingredients we put in it, and this is the price it is, versus the eggplant parmesan versus, the pizza or the lasagna. What GPTs do is kind of similar, but different. GPTs do offer that experience, and we'll talk about that in a second, of where you can just get a read-only dump of the knowledge of a place. But more importantly, GPTs offer an interactive way of getting information. And what do I mean by that? So I'd like to use this issue to substantiate that prediction and kind of maybe discuss what we're kind of already familiar with when it comes to receiving digital information on the web, which is through websites. But the first thing that we need to ask is, what is a website? So this picture here is a picture of the first ever website. If you're watching this, they'll call from CERN. This was made in April of 1993, which was a little over 20 years ago now, or 30 years ago now. And the thing about websites, especially in this era, is that they were read-only pages of information. So what does this mean? Due to the technical realities of the era, moving large packages of data as we know it, which could be HD video or real-time MMO games, reliably from computers physically located in different geographical locations wasn't a trivial problem. As such, the web pages that people saw were static only, and these were the first websites that really came to dominate the internet. They were just dumps of information that you could get by going to an IP address. But there was also something that made them special, even back in 1993. Inside the web pages themselves, creators were able to link to other pages. That means that this information could spread as nodes in a graph, which could create interesting, non-linear paths. A piece of paper physically located in Boise could point to another piece of paper in Baton Rouge, which in turn could point to a piece of paper in Singapore. And when you think about the consequences of something like this, you end up in a network of data where the data feels physically located because of the time it takes to load from one page to another, even though the data itself could exist on vastly different computers in physical space. And I think that this is really important because this kind of lays the groundwork for the idea that information doesn't need to be physically co-located where the informant and the informee are. An example of this is, again, being able to order on DoorDash from restaurants as opposed to being physically present, which created the rise of ghost kitchens, because now all of a sudden a lot of restaurants realized that they actually didn't need to have physical locations to service a lot of their user base, their customer base. So this linking was important because there's no way to randomly stumble upon websites continuously, which is why search engines perpetually search the web for new data. In other words, jumping from computer address to computer address is a discrete jump, where in the physical world, travel is contiguous. This is important because it means that the internet itself is sparse and has a tendency to amalgamate. So what do I mean by this? I basically mean that when you visit anything on the internet, you're visiting a direct address. You're going to bramadams.dev, or you're going to facebook.com, or you're going to your local DMV website. These all have physical addresses that are indexed by search engines, but you can't continuously update your address as if you would update a number on a measurement scale to get to another address. You can't accidentally find addresses, is basically what I'm saying here. Which is why you can have things like intranet, where there are certain parts of the web that are networked within each other, but aren't accessible to the greater internet as a whole. The real world isn't like this. The real world is a continuous experience, and I think it's best said through this quote. So I'm going to just read this quote from Trick Mirror, Reflections on Self-Delusion. The link should be in the description. As a medium, the internet is defined by a built-in performance incentive. In real life, you can walk around living life and be visible to other people. But you can't just walk around and be visible on the internet. For anyone to see you, you have to act. And this is kind of my point. By making these motions on the internet and putting up your address and putting up your real estate, you're making a discrete piece of land that belongs to you on the internet that doesn't actually have any accessible highways except the links that link to you and away from you. And the links that link to you and away from you are kind of like roads to different cities. And if you've ever seen anyone's network where they can kind of see the analytics for their website, you'll see different websites pointing to each other and people traveling across these edges from website to website. So because of this, information on websites becomes silos by default. Each acre of land was originally only farmed on by its creators, and this is still true today, even though the definition of creator has changed drastically, which I'll talk about in a second. Nearly 30 years after the CERN website launch, this is still the case. These large silos of today, YouTube, Reddit, and Twitch streams, still have the same concept. Information is an address that can be linked elsewhere. A lot of information on these websites is stored in the boundaries of these websites. So you'll see, subreddits and YouTube pages within the YouTube domain. So instead of you going to bramadams.dev, you'll go to youtube.com/bramadams or slash your favorite YouTuber here, Rajiv Surinder or something like that. So these are still very much the case of saying like, hey, you own a piece of land, but you're more renting a piece of land from YouTube, and then you're given a certain set of features that then your audience consumes as a read-only experience. So the concept is still very much the same as it was in the 1993 version, where instead of just the people at CERN having access to write to that page, people can now write to their own pages within the greater page, but you can't write to other people's YouTube pages. So as a YouTuber with 500 subscribers, you can't write to a Mr. Beast channel, even though that lives in the same website. So your @ is not your friendships. It is a link on two subpages within a social network domain. Alice follows or links to Bob. Bob follows or links to Cheryl and Alice, right? So again, you can see these highways start to format, but just in the silos of these websites. But the internet works like that as a whole. So what does this have to do with GPTs? Firstly, I think we should keep it completely honest. GPTs are also information. And if this is the same information that has the same qualities that we just described with websites, we should be able to see similar emergent features coming from GPTs. Or we might see a different set of features. And I think the way to talk about that is going to be actually have to talk about the large language model itself a little bit. So what I'm arguing is that GPTs and agents built off of GPTs or large language models, are a thin layer of information on a deep layer of contextual knowledge. GPTs are subject matter experts for foundational knowledge stacks. Basically, what this is imagine you had access to the internet, but like a weird proto-Gestalt version of the internet that knew things and then was able to reference those things in context to the things that you're making. So when I have a menu at a restaurant, again, this is a kind of pamphlet for a church or a brochure or anything where I'm trying to tell you information, I'm trying to figure out what are the right words that I can say that will make you understand the concepts of the things that I'm trying to sell to you or get you to understand. And this knowledge base is something that is generally a combination of implicit and explicit. You won't see a pamphlet that describes to you what the concept of the sun is if you want to take a vacation to Cabo or the beach. It'll just say, this is a sunny beach for you to relax. And you're supposed to fill in the details that, okay, I live in a colder area of the world. I need to relax. There's probably chairs there on the beach where I can lay out and calm down. So that graph of data is still very much there. It's just merely implicit rather than the explicit discrete jumps of the World Wide Web. Now, this is important. Again, when we look back up at this CERN thing, we see, and even in this blog post, for example, these underlined links everywhere are links to other pages on the internet that you can visit and see information that isn't on this page. So this is kind of an explicit link saying, hey, you should check this out if you want to know where this idea came from. GPTs have that implicitly because of the way that they were trained on their foundational models. So I argue that the role of a GPT creator is to introduce a few new concepts inside a context window, the things that the model doesn't know, and then the model will create implicit links to the rest of itself. So we can see, for example, that the GPT subject matter in this picture that I'm linking here is up in this top right corner. Red lines are information that are easy to access from out-of-scope GPTs knowledge base. So this is the foundational model itself, is the entire graph, and you're basically just introducing 2 or 3 new nodes on top of it. So GPTs differ from websites from one immediate facet. GPTs are fundamentally conversational, and I think that this is really important. Instead of being read-only, the user is compelled to engage with the bot, to interact, and in fact, the assistants themselves will do nothing unless prompted, which is kind of like a website too, in the sense that even though the website is read-only, you are interacting with the website. Even with this video right now, unless you shut your ears and go la 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 la, you have to, a part of your brain is processing the words that I'm saying and the images that you're seeing on the screen. So GPTs just take this and put it in front of you. So you're left with this kind of tabula rasa message GPT box where you have generally conversational starters, which are very helpful because they help narrow the space. But the idea with agents is that you narrow that even further and really kind of give your user an experience that they'll be able to attach to directly. To show that off, I'll show this new ChatGPT that I actually just built the other day. So I got the box set for all of the Hunter x Hunter novels because I'm a huge Hunter x Hunter fan. And as a matter of fact, I'll actually just show those in 1 second. So I have here my 3 copies of my Hunter x Hunter set out of the 36 that I bought. And I'm a huge fan of Hunter x Hunter. This is my favorite piece of art of all time. I really can't get enough of it, and I really do think about the series a lot. And it means a lot to me as both a philosophical piece of work as well as just a beautiful story with amazing characters that are really easy to get involved with. So, I actually got into Hunter through the 2011 anime. And here's an example of a GPT that I built that uses an agent to take a picture of Hunter x Hunter volume, like the ones that you just saw me hold there, and then use that to find the part of the ending the ending song that belongs to that arc. So you can imagine there's about 6 or 7 arcs in Hunter x Hunter, and each of the arcs has its own ending song. So I wanted to be able to show that off. Okay, so we see here. I upload this picture here, and then the bot is going to write that this is the part 4 of this. I sped it up to 2 times speed. You click the URL, and then it starts playing the audio to the song. Sorry for the abrupt. Maybe that was a little bit loud. I'll turn it down a little bit, and we'll show one more example. So again, how this is working is I'm taking a photo of a manga cover. It's looking at the number in the bottom left corner here. I'm confirming that, sending this to the GPT model. The GPT model has this foundational understanding of numbers, right? So it has the idea that, okay, it's going to say that this is volume 11. And then in the GPT directions themselves, so we'll wait for this to load here. So the model is thinking, and it's like, okay, so I found that this is the cover of volume 11, and here's the time-stamped link to that volume. And it starts playing that ending. So this is technically a website, right? We were doing read-only tasks, but we took it a step further by saying, let's integrate knowledge that I didn't say explicitly. And to understand that, let's actually take a quick look at the instruction set itself. So if I go to the instruction set for this GPT, what we have here is on taking a picture, which is me telling it like a kind of pseudo programming, look for the volume number and link to the correct part of the timestamp. If not in the system, say it's not in the system, which means that we should get rid of any videos that aren't available in the system. And then on the help command, tell users what you can do and prompt them to upload an image of a Hunter x Hunter image cover. So you can actually see here that for volumes 1 through 5, it starts at the beginning of the video. For 6 through 13, it's this timestamp. For 14 through 18, it's this timestamp, etc., etc. And then I have some quotes that I link as well, and I just say this allows for a little bit more of a fun experience. So what we just saw there was kind of a website, but not really a website that is similar to newgrounds.com or reddit.com. It's a website where it was waiting on a very particular set of information to be uploaded by a user. And then once it receives that information, it was able to do something with it and engage with it using its implicit knowledge and the explicit knowledge that it was given. So it's almost like it could go into its links, read information in those links, and then foundationally use that data to understand what it's supposed to do with it because of the external data listed on the page itself. So the GPT is in a way, I'm not showing the wrong screen. The GPT is in a way actually using its subject matter and its website information to be able to read its own website, which is kind of interesting, right? Because in a way, when we read websites, it's a very kind of like, I'm reading this website and I'm seeing it on the screen. But with a GPT, it's like, no, the GPT is kind of reading the instructions that you gave it, but it's also understanding its core foundational model. And this is why this is a really big deal and why I talk about this kind of stuff all the time. So I think that because of the GPT store, particularly, we're going to start to see a minimum of 2 types of GPTs that are going to begin to crop up. And I actually made a video about this back all the way in 2020 when GPT-3 had just come out, that there was going to be a time where there was going to be a bunch of assistants. And it's kind of funny to see it happening 4 years later. Not that I am a Nostradamus of any sort, but it is cool to see your predictions come true. So smart forms can't be today can't be inquired against. They only demand in silence. Why do you need my middle name? What is an EIN? How long until I hear back on average? These are some questions that you might ask when you're filling out a form. A GPT will be able to stop you mid-form to teach you these things and then continue to complete the form for you. Excitingly, these can branch programmatic as well. If a user says X, respond with Y, yada, yada, yada. This type of form is to get a user to an end state. You can imagine that you're trying to get a user from here A to here B, and the distance from here to B is information that the GPT needs to extract from the user. This is kind of what you do every day when you log into a web page and you need to put in your username and password. To get to the B of the logged in version of Netflix, you need to give it the A, which is your credentials to get into Netflix's page. So this is kind of like a more direct type of transaction, but I think this is going to be insanely useful for when you're at the DMV, or think about how many times you're taking tests, and all of these tests are really hard to understand because there's a lot of implicit knowledge inside of them that you're supposed to know. Like, again, an EIN was a good example of that, which I just linked in the blog, which was a employee identification number. You know what I mean? Like, most people wouldn't know what that is unless they run their own business and things like that. So that's the first class of GPT. The second class of GPT that I imagine is going to pop up are local information load balancers. Just like websites that gained network value in the 2000s, so will GPTs create local networks for local problems and then link to each other. So this is important because when you go outside into the world that is locally yours, there's a lot of implicit information that hasn't really been explicitly verbalized as a website or as a book or just someone's knowledge base. So using combinations of things like embeddings and natural language search, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be able to upload natural language data about their favorite cafe down the street, and when it closed down for a while because the manager got into a fight with his sister or something like that. And these local information load balancers are kind of like audio guides at a museum, is kind of like the way that I would describe them. So being able to access this thin layer of making the world a little bit more vibrant is, I think, a thing that's going to happen with GPTs that didn't really truly happen with websites. I mean, it did. Obviously, people use Google Maps all the time, which is a website, right? Or an app that runs on your phone and gets you information from point A to point B. Or Apple Maps. I use Apple Maps these days. I love Apple Maps over Google Maps. I never thought I would say that, but here I am. And this audio guide layer, for example, when you're at a museum, makes the museum much more of a fulfilling process, because now all of a sudden you know why the people who created this artwork did and why the museum put it up here. And then you can have the curator say, like, this is why we chose it for this collection, and all of these other things that really make the experience really that much more worth it. So I think we're going to see a lot of those with GPTs, and I've already built 2 of those. The World of Warcraft Season of Discovery Rune Helper and the interactive conversation blog post. Let's actually, okay. So now we've opened up the WoW Season of Discovery Rune Helper, and we can see that there are some options here at the bottom. We have help, show me all the video guides that you have for Rogue, what runes do you have for undead rogues, and show me pictures for quick draw. So you can see that we have video guides, picture guides, and runes. So let's see the pictures. So I'm going to click these pictures. It's going to open its knowledge base, and then it's going to start just kind of like streaming in this information. So it's reading the information that it has, pulling the information from the different links, putting them in a kind of just-in-time website of sorts. So instead of you having to type in the website and going to a static URL that has this one version of something, this is actually just a collection of images that the model is smart enough to understand that, okay, these are what you're asking for. You're asking for this image, this image, this image, and this image, because this is what's in my database. So if I say, do you have anything for the Druid class, it says that, yes, I have information on the Druid class, and you can start to see that it's pulling up video resources and links to things that people have listed to, but also how to add more information to the knowledge base. So these knowledge bases are going to grow and change over time. And I think what a lot of people aren't getting, and what really pisses me off, is like when people are like, oh, but it has a ChatGPT Plus subscription and ChatGPT hallucinates all the time and stuff like that, is because, yeah, it doesn't have it's so heavily reliant on its implicit knowledge graph that it doesn't actually have an explicit understanding of the localized information that's actually important to make executable actions. So when you need an executable action of like, I need to put this in at the oven for 425, but I don't have an oven that goes up to 425 because every time I do that, the middle rack falls down and makes a huge noise and it becomes a huge mess and I have to clean it up every single time. So it's like, okay, let's work around that, right? So you might have an explicit knowledge base where it's like, oh yeah, I know that this type of oven has a tendency to break. So if you have this type of oven, do this instead, right? So that's what these models can do. And more importantly, they're able to do it in a way where, again, they're forming these websites at runtime. So this is like a runtime version of an information dump for a website, which is very exciting. So in sum, I claim that GPT is a subject matter expertise on top of a massive implicit graph of conversational data. In a sense, a website or a pamphlet or a brochure or a book is this as well, each holding subject matter expertise on running marathons or ducks or whatever. But with the architecture of the web, these were siloed from one another, taking manual work from a human to leap from concept to concept. As the internet has evolved, we are now in a world where explicit graphs live inside of information silos, YouTube recommendation feeds, mutual follows from people on Twitter. GPT takes the implicit graphs, give them context, and put them in a place where subject matter expertise comes first and that implicit graph comes second. And again, this is really important because it's the context of what you didn't say. It's the things that you know that you don't know, but you don't know that you know. And it's that kind of relationship with information that we tend to forget about because we're just so focused on the immediate impact, emotionality of any information that we receive, which is actually a really big shame about the internet. And one of the reasons that I'm particularly excited for a future where large language model agents are become more common is because I think they'll give people a little bit more boundaries with understanding the emotionality of information and not get too attached to something that they see on the internet that is viral or has big numbers. So the person must be smart, or has small numbers. So the person must be unpopular or stupid. It's just all these layers that got wrapped up on the internet that made the internet a really kind of toxic place, even less than 30 years after we were looking at internet that was just this, right? So how do we get from this www page from CERN that was talking about W3 project components and bibliographies in FTP, kind of building up the initial mailing list to the type of internet that we're at today, where people are very stressed by it. So these are important things to think about. So now let's jump to the next section, which is the what I'm reading section, and we'll close out here. Okay, so welcome to the what I'm reading section. Right here, we have 4 quotes that are going to be similar to the GPTs thing that we just talked about. In particular, which I'm saying that let's just read these quotes one by one and see what they're saying. So the first quote is from The Victorian Internet, which is a book about telegraphs and how the internet was basically precursored by telegraphs 150 years before our current version. So today the internet is often described as an information superhighway. Its 19th century precursor, the electric telegraph, was dubbed the highway of thought. So this is one of those concepts where really nothing is new under the sun. A lot of things that have been done before will be done again, and they'll be done in ways that are better because the technology that's accessible is better. But then sometimes there's emergent new ways of doing things too that weren't possible just because you didn't have the speed or you didn't have a certain characteristic that belongs to things that doesn't exist today. And I recently watched a pretty interesting podcast with David Deutsch and Naval, and David Deutsch was making the argument that GPT and ChatGPT, etc., aren't AGI, and it's nowhere near AGI. And I actually have a tendency to agree with him. And I don't necessarily think that a even though I've actually done research on these models, I've done capability testing before certain models have come out before with OpenAI. And I think that even though the models have emergent capabilities because of these implicit information graphs causing some really interesting concepts, that doesn't mean that they've made that leap to general intelligence. And, I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think it's going to happen the same way that these kind of events happen. It's going to be completely unpredictable and it's not going to be something that we control. So I guess what you can argue is that like the type of local emergence that happens in the current traditional way of scaling these models won't get us to AGI, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the process of doing that local scaling, we create something that can create AGI and then we miss it, right? There's like might be a combination of just information that's on medical research and chemistry research and physics research and computer science research, and then they're kind of all in their own silo, but then you get put into GPT-4 or GPT-5, and then what people won't notice is that right in there, if you ask the right question, is knowledge or general intelligence. And it won't be general intelligence itself. It'll be the babbling monkey that can create general intelligence. It's weird. It's not really something that I've formalized, but I'll write on it in the future. So here's another quote from The Dream Machine, which is a book about the ARPANET. So TCP/IP New Year's of 1983 is an event that many would call the birth of the internet. So this is 10 years before that CERN page that I just showed earlier on. And I think it's important to talk about this, right? Because this is basically saying that the birth of the internet was, in a lot of ways, the CSNet and the ARPANET and these kind of small networks of colleges across the country who wanted to get data really fast from computer to computer. But more importantly, they wanted computers to be able to talk to computers directly, where even with the telegraph, for example, you needed huge sets of humans to talk to each other and kind of decipher these things and have these giant switchboards to switch routes. So giving computers the ability to do this routing themselves was a really big deal. And that's what TCP/IP did. This next quote is again from Trick Mirror, which we encountered earlier. And again, all these book links will be in the description. The internet generally minimizes the need for physical action. You don't have to do much of anything but sit behind a screen to live an acceptable and possibly valorized 21st century life. This one's obviously interesting from a social implication because I tend to agree. I think that, especially with the rapid increase of status from the internet and very real money opportunities and audience opportunities from people who you wouldn't meet in real life ever because they just don't exist in your local corpus. Being able to have an interesting life is much more accessible when you can filter your life to being interesting by editing. And there's kind of some tongue in cheek there, but I think the overall point that I'm making here is that the valorization of Twitch streamers like a Pokimane, for example, or a Kai Cenat, or a famous Instagrammer like a Kendall Jenner, turning that into a multi-billion-dollar business line and being able to sell real products that people buy, the Mr. Beasts, the Joe Rogans, all of these people made their money off of the internet. Now, true, the internet basically just megaphoned the abilities that they would have already had, which is to be maybe charismatic and entertaining. But I don't doubt that they couldn't have made it work without the internet. Sometimes things just die out without being able to reach a certain level of scale. And to not be able to kind of own that scale or contain what they're trying to do, I think that they would kind of like maybe lose their energy. So in an older world, a lot of those people probably wouldn't be famous. Maybe sans Joe Rogan, who was on Fear Factor and was already doing TV shows. So whatever this last quote is from The World Beyond Your Head. Whatever you're into, there's a website for that. We all play a fractional part in quite some trivial matter, as Kierkegaard says, and this is soothing. So this is the final point that I want to make, because again, I really wanted to bring it back to websites and the relationships between GPTs and websites. And for me, when I think of my website, bramadams.dev, and why I put so much effort into this website, is because it really kind of feels like mine. It feels like my corner of the internet. It feels like something that I own and something that I want to take care of and something that I have been excited to watch grow over time. And every time that I hit this random button here and I'm taken to a different post that I've written with like different information and stuff, I feel nothing but pride. And it's like a really interesting feeling to be able to scroll through your life as if it were a journal, but then to also be able to add to that journal yourself, and kind of like come up with new ideas and concepts and things like that. So I think that owning a website is just a phenomenal thing, and it's a lot of fun, and I've learned so much, and I've met so many people through it. In a very slow and organic way compared to the kind of algorithmic nature of kind of like the Twitters and the YouTubes of the world, where sure, I got to be put in contact with people, but it's just such an aggressive website all the time that you're being so deluged with other stuff that you never really get a chance for the peace of mind that comes from owning your own website. So this is my fractional part of quite some trivial matter, I guess, for lack of a better term. But thank you for watching this video. We're at the end here. These videos, I'm just getting started with this kind of video version. I've been writing these newsletters now for well over 40 weeks, where this is issue 42, and I'll probably actually backfill a little bit and kind of review some of my more interesting issues that I think and turn them into video format. But the best way to support me is to come and subscribe to the newsletter. So come check out brammadams.dev. You'll get these newsletters in your inbox every Sunday, and learn about some books and some technology and some deep life stuff. So thank you for watching. Have a great day. I'll catch you later. Bye.